Yellowstone National Park rangers just announced they made a chilling discovery. The US Rangers revealed that they found a human foot floating inside one of the hot pools. The Yellowstone National Park Rangers said this isn't the first time this has happened, and warned visitors to stay away from the hot pools. The discovery was made on Friday the 19th of August, revealing that the foot was discovered inside the Abyss Pool, which is one of the deepest hot springs that's found within Yellowstone. Park Rangers said the following: "An investigation by Yellowstone National Park law enforcement officers is ongoing. Evidence from the investigation thus far suggests that an incident involving one individual likely occurred on the morning of July 31st, 2022, and this was at the Abyss Pool. Currently, the park believes that there was no foul play. Visitors are reminded to stay on boardwalks and trails in thermal areas and exercise extreme caution around thermal features. The ground in hydrothermal areas is fragile and thin, and there is scalding water just below the surface." Yellowstone National Park officials said that incidents like this happen a few times a year, and that despite warnings from park rangers, people still put themselves in situations that can cause harm. The National Park statistics said that this year violations have tripled, meaning that 120 arrests have been made, which resulted in many of those individuals being banned from the national park. They said that what many people don't understand is that the crust above the water is extremely thin, and that there have been accounts of people falling into hot springs. In fact, this recently happened to one woman. After she fell in, the national park was closed to visitors, so park officials said she was there illegally. When she fell into the hot spring, she suffered various wounds. At the time, the national park had been shut down from visitors since the 24th of March, and although at the time there had been talks about opening it back up to the public, officials said there were still ongoing talks about what was going to happen. The woman in question ignored the warnings and was found walking on the roaming side of the park. At the time, the individual had not been identified, but she could be seen taking photographs close to Old Faithful. Despite falling in and injuring herself, the woman was able to pull herself out and drive 50 miles. She was, however, stopped by a park ranger and airlifted to a burn center at Eastern Idaho Regional Medical Center. Park officials have said that even though it's bad she was injured, she may face penalties for not following the rules. They said that at the time everyone else had been doing a good job at staying away from the national park during this time, and that it was a shame that this incident happened. Last year, officials working at Yellowstone said that someone went missing in the park, and that the individual's brother, who was a Navy SEAL, had vanished from the area. Workers at Yellowstone National Park released a statement at the end of September and said that an autopsy had been completed on the 67-year-old, saying that exposure to the elements or hypothermia was the cause of his passing. The two men had visited the area, with his brother at the time being 74 years old. The alarms were raised by family members when they didn't return from their trip. National Park workers said they had found a campsite with their belongings, saying that other personal belongings were found close to the shores of Shoshone Lake. Park rangers have said they're scanning the water in order to find out what happened, with the National Park Service's Submerged Resources Center saying that they're using sonar equipment during their investigations. Park rangers at the time said they continued to search for Crumbo by foot and boat, with assistance from Grand Tetons National Park's interagency helicopter. They said that recovery efforts will continue for the next several days as conditions warrant. Rangers at the time said that it had been 3 weeks since the 74-year-old went missing. Both men were not fragile though, as both of them were former National Park Service workers, along with Crumbo also being a retired Navy SEAL. The lake where Mr. O'Neill went missing can be found southwest of West Thumb in Yellowstone, and something that was noted is that this lake barely reaches above 9 degrees, with rangers saying that if someone found themselves submerged in the lake, they could have as little as 20 minutes to get themselves out. Yellowstone National Park said the following: "This incident remains under investigation. While we cannot comment further about the specifics of this investigation, we will provide updates when appropriate to do so. As mentioned, this isn't the first time that something like this has happened in Yellowstone, with park officials saying that although the supervolcano is of immense interest, most of their days revolve around watching park visitors and ensuring that they aren't putting themselves in danger. Sometimes Yellowstone workers, though, are not quick enough to reach people, and the unthinkable happens. One report was detailed back in 2016, and it was stated that a man had fallen into a hot spring in Yellowstone. However, his body could not be recovered because it had dissolved before park rangers could reach it. The individual was Colin Scott, a 23-year-old who attempted to soak or hot pot in the hot spring. For those unaware, hot potting is a trend where someone will jump and attempt to wash themselves in a hot spring. The only problem with this, though, is that temperatures in these hot springs are far too high for humans to handle, and the results are usually extreme burns and a trip to the hospital. Some people have been lucky and have only sustained minor burns, but unfortunately in this case Colin didn't make it out. The accident was even recorded by the man's sister, and these details have come to light due to a news station submitting a Freedom of Information request. Yellowstone's Deputy Chief Ranger Laurent Veras said the following about the incident: "The whole area is geothermally active. There's a closure in place to protect people from doing that for their own safety. It's a very unforgiving environment. The sad thing is that park officials said this incident could have been easily avoided, as the pair were seen actively looking for a hot spring, ignoring the various warning signs that told them not to do so." The incident report reads as follows: "I was later informed that all recovery had been ceased due to lack of physical remains. It was explained to me that due to the acidity of the water in the thermal feature, as well as the extremely high temperature of the thermal feature, the remains most likely dissolved overnight. I attended the closing brief for the incident and had cleared the area in order to process evidence. I left the key to Colin Scott's car in the Norris Gaza Basin Ranger's office, so that Crystal could have access to it when Colin's father arrived. The car was recovered without incident and not in my presence. I was also told that Colin Scott's father no longer wanted to meet with me." When Yellowstone Park Rangers aren't looking out for visitors, they're spending their time analysing data from the supervolcano, which is located directly under Yellowstone. It's important for park rangers to conduct these investigations, as the supervolcano will cause a huge amount of damage when it eventually erupts, so keeping an eye on the vital signs is of utmost importance. One of the greatest fears of the modern era, due to its potential to cause an apocalyptic scenario never seen before, is that of the eruption of the Yellowstone supervolcano. Though some might not be aware of its dangers, it appears to pose one of the greatest realistic chances of wiping out the majority of life on Earth, and possibly lead to the extinction of the human race. In recent years, scientists have conducted a variety of experiments to understand the effects the Yellowstone supervolcano would have on humanity. Referred to by scientists as a super eruption, the force and material that would be ejected from the massive Yellowstone supervolcano, if it were to erupt, would be among one of the largest explosions to ever be recorded on the face of the Earth. When looking at estimated comparisons of this pressure and ejection of magma compared to that of Mount St. Helens, it appears that the eruption of the Yellowstone supervolcano would be roughly 10,000 times larger in estimated cubic kilometers than that of the eruption at Mount St. Helens. What this essentially translates out to would be the immediate ejection of more than 2,500 cubic kilometers of ash, magma and materials, a size much larger than that of the 0.25 cubic kilometers ejected after the Mount St. Helens eruption. Though the supervolcano isn't expected to cause a massive upheaval of land, this large amount of pressure being released will still cause a blast wave that can cause damage out past the states of Wyoming, Idaho and Montana. Additionally, the Yellowstone supervolcano lies close to a number of sensitive fault lines, and these can be found all across the west coast. It's believed that this massive amount of pressure released in one moment, coupled with the massive amount of force generated via the supereruption, will cause a domino effect of seismic activity that could lead to fault lines completely sliding in opposite directions, causing a number of massive earthquakes all across the west coast. The earthquakes would be some of the largest ever to have been recorded, and would only lead to further damage of roads, highways, cities and nearby constructions, completely blocking off those affected from reaching the help they would need. Researchers found that after the eruption of a supervolcano, it's often been recorded that there tends to be a massive cooling event that occurs around the world. This is due to the fact that the ejection of a large amount of volcanic ash causes a global darkness event, preventing the planet from sufficiently warming up and causing a global ice age. This appears to also have been the case a mere 100,000 years ago, when the Toba supereruption occurred and nearly drove humanity to extinction. Prior to this event, there was an estimated 1 million human population. After the event took place, there were only 11,000 humans left, of which caused a massive bottleneck effect that allowed us to see the time in which such an event took place. The Toba supereruption caused a global blackout that lasted for more than 10 years. During this time, a massive ice age occurred, and an atmospheric cooling event that lasted for another 1,000 years. Given these calculations, it's expected that if the Yellowstone supervolcano were to erupt in the modern day, the amount of ash spewed will travel through the atmosphere and blot out the sun from all around the world, leading to a modern ice age that would prevent the sun from being seen for 6 to 7 years in total, creating a seemingly endless darkness for all life on Earth, and record low temperatures never before recorded. One of the main problems with the global cooling event is not that of the drop in temperatures all across the world, but rather that of its effects on crops on a massive global scale. With this expected worldwide blackout, researchers believe that for more than 6 to 7 years, it will be impossible for farmers around the world to grow any kind of produce or grain. This also means that it will be impossible for farmers to look after livestock. Considering the fact that agriculture is the lowest rung on the ladder of the economic scale, this would have disastrous effects on industry, development, construction efforts feeding citizens and the global economy. Essentially, there would be mass starvation all across the world, as people raid grocery stores for the last remaining food in the world. Additionally, the blackout would lead to a number of wildlife populations immediately dying out, as their habitats became destroyed, meaning that hunting and foraging will become impossible to sustain. Even a number of off-gridding living situations would be disastrously affected, as the majority of doomsday preppers living in homesteads rely on local agriculture, solar panels for power, along with a number of other supplies that require their local habitats remaining intact. With these changes, the blackout will reach everywhere around the world, making no place safe enough to withstand such changes. It will lead to the shutdown of government, civilization, and order itself. As mass starvation circles the globe, the human population will be expected to drop by an estimated 95%, as most of the well-developed countries will be affected the worst, and the least developed countries will adapt the fastest. A lack of crops from around the world, the breakdown of infrastructure, inability to travel across damaged roads throughout the United States, as well as the complete 6 to 7 year darkness that would follow the eruption means that at the end of these initial damages, the entire world will begin to enter a stage of total economic shutdown. This will first begin at the center of damaged cities, and the inability for governments from around the world to offer aid of any kind. As the volcanic ash spreads and brings darkness around the world, it will only take 3 days before all grocery stores run empty, as the shipping trucks fail to deliver necessary goods. After this occurs, raiding of supplies will quickly begin, as people from around the world will be experiencing starvation, This panic will cause the total breakdown of all law and authority as people centre around their individual needs. The inability would then quickly follow farmers being unable to grow and harvest crops, along with many crops from around the world immediately dying out. The only chance one would have at outlasting such an event would require them to have created an underground facility, of which wouldn't be affected to the large amount of falling ash. The threatening panic of other people fighting for resources, as well as the storage of enough food, water and supplies to last for 7 years. Considering such a safe room does not exist for most, of which even most doomsday preppers only store enough food for 6 months to a year, outlasting such an event will prove to be impossible. Not only does this risk the extinction of all human life on our planet, but we'll see a global cooling event and an ice age last another 1,000 years following this 6 to 7 year darkness. Last year, Yellowstone Park rangers announced that 50 earthquakes had hit Yellowstone in just 1 week, with park officials noting that one of these was the biggest of the year. It was a 3.3 magnitude earthquake. These earthquake clusters have been hitting Yellowstone hard in the last few years, with a team of researchers noting that recent activity has been hitting the park deep under Yellowstone Lake. The United States Geological Survey has said they're still learning new things about Yellowstone National Park, noting that one of the most recent discoveries was that of a thermal feature that was not in the database. The USGS said the following on their website. Earlier this year, an issue of Yellowstone Caldera Chronicles reported on the discovery of an emerging thermal feature within Yellowstone National Park. The area was identified in thermal infrared satellite imagery, and was a region of warm ground that was not in the park's database. It's located along the northeast boundary of the Sour Creek Dome, near West Turn Lake, and it appears to be an extension of the previously known Turn Lake thermal areas. The United States Geological Survey has said that there's over 160 potentially active volcanoes in the US. Our history has been greatly affected by volcanic eruptions, with one of the most well-known ones being that of Mount Vesuvius. In 79 AD, Mount Vesuvius erupted, destroying much of the city with volcanic debris, and covering it in 19 feet of ash. For centuries, the ruins of Pompeii laid undisturbed, and perfectly preserved by the thick blanket of ash. In the 1700s, the discovery of the once hidden city was revealed to the world. It was completely frozen in time. There were perfectly preserved remains of people trying to find shelter from the eruption. Even bakeries still had fresh loaves of bread in the oven. Today, people's lives are still being shaped by volcanoes. Scientists have said that it's important that we monitor and study these natural wonders, saying that we can learn a lot from studying volcanoes. Sometimes, though, researchers are informed of a chilling encounter that happened due to volcanic activity. This was the case when a man in Hawaii had fallen down a lava tube. Hawaii's Volcano National Park Service said the following. As islands created by volcanoes, Hawaii is crisscrossed by countless lava tubes. These underground passageways, also known as pyroducts, are created by lava flows themselves, and are capable of transporting great quantities of lava long distances underneath the surface. When the supply of lava stops at the end of an eruption, or if it gets diverted elsewhere, it leaves behind an empty cave." End quote. The 71-year-old man was cutting his trees at the time of the incident, with officials saying that he had fallen around 22 feet or 7 meters underground. Responding officers arrived at the scene at 8:30 and found the man underground. The Hawaii Police Department said the following. "No foul play is suspected in this case." End quote. The man was taken to hospital, but unfortunately it was announced that he had passed away. According to Hawaii's National Park Service, they said that it can be hard to detect when these tubes form, noting that they can be created within a matter of weeks, saying that this is why accidents happen, because people can be walking on one area of land and it can be fine 1 week, but fast forward a week later and a lava tube suddenly forms. National Park officials said the following: when a lava tube is active, lava travels along its floor at temperatures that exceed 2000 degrees. Winds of superheated fumes may blast through the tunnel, yet the only sound may be the constant soft hiss of the relentless flow. End quote. It's not just Hawaii where this has happened. Solfatara is a volcanic crater that can be found in Italy, and as with anything like this, it attracts a large audience. This volcano is dormant and hasn't been active in hundreds of years, but despite this, the magma beneath it is still very hot. Back in September 2017, the family visited the region in order to take some photographs. However, the family's 11-year-old got too close to the crater, slipped and fell in. Officials said that due to the sulfuric fumes, he quickly lost consciousness and ended up passing away. The younger brother also slipped, but officials announced that he was able to get himself out. Back in March 2010, a man was visiting Mount Bata in Bali. The man was a Swedish tourist who'd hiked up the active volcano. However, when he reached the top, he lost his footing and fell in. Due to the height he'd climbed, it's announced that he fell over 150 meters, or 500 feet. The friend said that he'd passed away upon impact, and said that he'd gone up the volcano on his own during a morning walk. Unlike many of these stories, officials in the region said that the hike is extremely safe, and that many tourists had taken this path. They said this was just a freak accident. Residents in Los Llanos have just said they were sleeping for the night when they were woken up by a loud rattling noise. They said they were sleeping just outside the exclusion zone in La Palma, saying that they had been forced out of their houses as they'd been engulfed by the lava. They are currently living in caravans and have said they're worried as the lava is getting closer. One of the residents said the following: "I'm in despair because I don't know what's going to happen to my house. We spent the last few nights staring at the volcano, trying to see what it was doing, but now it's kind of normal to have it there." End quote. Those living in these conditions though have said that they're thankful to be alive, and that they're trying to look at the positives. The United States Geological Survey said the following: "The ongoing eruption at the summit began at 3:21 p.m. on September 29, 2021. Lava activity is currently confined within the crater. Gas emissions and seismic activity at the summit remain elevated. HVO field crews, equipped with specialized safety gear, monitor the eruption from within the national park, with NPS permission. HVO scientists collect detailed data to assess hazards and understand how the eruption is evolving at the summit, all of which are shared with the National Park Service and emergency managers. Access to this hazardous area is by permission from and in condition with Hawaii's Volcano National Park. Kilauea is the youngest and most active volcano in the island of Hawaii, with a consistently active summit caldera that frequently hosts lava lake-style eruptions. Forecasting heightened magma activity is key to assessing global volcanic hazards, including eruptions from lateral rift zones of volcanoes. At Kilauea volcano, lava is repeatedly affecting the same segments." End quote. So what do you make of these recent announcements? Be sure to leave your questions and answers in the comment section below, and help us to grow this community while working to solve these unexplained mysteries. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos.